Hello friends, how are you doing today? My name is Mary, this is Happily Ever Esch, and today I am chatting all of the books that I read in April. I hope that you all had a wonderful reading month in April. I sure did. I read my favorite book of the year thus far and probably will be my favorite book of the year. It's a high bar that has been set, so I cannot wait to chat all of the books that I read this month with you. So the first book that I finished was an audiobook, and that is The Dutch House by Ann Patchett. This is a relatively new release, has gotten a lot of hype, bookish buzz, and I know it has been pretty well received from the BookTube prize this year. It at least made it onto the second round, which is exciting, and I am happy to say that I quite enjoyed it. I put myself on the wait list for this a while ago because Tom Hanks narrates it, and that is an absolute treat. His voice is like butter and just kind of so enveloping and comforting. He's done a lot of very popular movies, and so he's a very recognizable voice. So I do think that this would be a great audiobook to pick up if you're kind of starting out into the audiobook world. It was a phenomenal job done by Mr. Tom Hanks. I read Ann Patchett's Commonwealth earlier this year and quite adored it. Knew that Ann Patchett was going to be a new favorite of mine, and though I have some on my shelf that needs to be read, this one just kind of made its way into my ears before I've had a chance to read the other ones that I own, but I'm so glad that I ended up picking this one up. Ann Patchett has a way with writing family stories, kind of mundane stories, but she totally pulls you in and makes you care. I really enjoyed the strong fairy tale vibes that you kind of got through all this. There's no really like magical realism or anything like that, but there is very much this like modern fairy tale feel to it. We kind of have an evil stepmother, we have two lost orphan children, we have this haunted kind of enchanted house, a lost fortune. There's all of these different aspects that she's playing with of a fairy tale, but in a very modern, readable, contemporary setting. She made these characters so compelling, this place so compelling, you just feel what she's writing. I also really enjoy the way that she is exploring memory, what we remember, and how our memories shape history, because the only way we go back and relive it is in our mind and in our own experiences, and how singular our experience of the world is. I also thought she kind of played with the evil stepmother trope in a really kind of interesting way, because this story kind of bears the question, who is the evil stepmother? Who is the evil mother in this story? So the children do have a stepmother who comes into their lives, but there's also kind of this aspect with their own mother, and so I really enjoyed the way she kind of played with that trope. But overall, this is a quiet story that seems to be very much kind of in Ann Patchett's wheelhouse. I think if you like her other work, you'll probably like this book, but it has gotten a lot of really good and high praise, so I definitely think that you should check it out if that sounds interesting to you. It was a high 4-star read for me. It was such a treat. I loved it, and has definitely solidified that I adore Ann Patchett and her writing. All right. The most favorite, you can stop watching after this one, not really, but this is the kind of pinnacle of my reading year so far, and that is Unburied Singh by Jesmyn Ward. Holy cow, did I love this book. Please, if the literary fiction title scares you off from this, or if you've heard that there's ghosts in it and that scares you off, please still give it a chance, because it is so compellingly readable, it's so compellingly told. Jesmyn Ward is a genius. I cannot wait to read the rest of her backlist, and I know that she is writing more, and I am just so excited to see what she does. This has been likened to a Southern Odyssey, kind of the Faulkner and all of those, you know, Southern giants work, and I absolutely put this in the category. There is something epic and sweeping about it, but there's also something so personal, and we're digging into the lives of these characters. This is a linear pretty much story. It does kind of flash back and forth in time, but there is like a plot line that we're following, and it's this family. We're following multiple points of view. My favorite point of view was from Jojo, who is the tween child in this, and then we also get his mother's perspective, his grandmother's perspective, and then there is a ghost perspective in this as well. It very much has like a Grapes of Wrath Steinbeck feel, where we're like focusing on the small and the intimate story, but then we're also kind of zooming out and looking at the collective, and in this it's very much looking at the collective history and trauma from the Black community in America. There's a very strong kind of haunting metaphor in this, and I think that's why I was totally able to get on board with the ghost, because it just was such a beautiful metaphor, and it just felt so perfectly and seamlessly into the story. I think Jesmyn Ward is a genius. I think this work is amazing. It was my book club pick, and so I got to discuss it, and that was a lot of fun, just to kind of fun. It was, you know, a good and interesting experience to get to chat about this. This book is a hard read, but it's also a beautiful read. There's one of my favorite male relationships with Jojo, the young boy, and his grandfather is absolutely beautiful. I also felt the portrayal of children was so realistic. I still think about these characters all the time. They have definitely like burrowed their way into my soul, and I think about them. And I mentioned before that I work with children in the foster care system, and that's not this child's experience, but there has been abuse and trauma in his life, and just the way he was portrayed, I could see it in a lot of the children that I work with, and some of those similar experiences. And oh my goodness, this book was phenomenal. All the stars. When I was done reading it, I felt hollowed out, but like in the best way. It felt like it simultaneously gave something to me, but also like took something with me when I closed the last page. Read this book. It's phenomenal. And I zoomed through it. Like, for being like a literary fiction, you know, kind of a very poetic writing style, it's so readable. Like, it was a quick read for me. It was just that good. Pick it up, read it. I don't think you'll be disappointed. It's so, so, so good. All right, after that, I finished a graphic memoir. I guess it's not a graphic novel, a graphic memoir, and that is March, book 1 by John Lewis, and then Andrew Aiden and Nate Powell helped write and draw his story. This was such a great and important book. I know lots of people recommend this when they're recommending graphic novels, and I totally understand why. Or graphic memoirs. I'm not a big graphic memoir novel person. That's not my preferred way of storytelling, but I thought that it was especially powerful in this story. This is following John Lewis's early life and his experience with the nonviolence movement, and for him in particular in Nashville, Tennessee. I really enjoyed the way the story was told in this flashback narrative. We're starting the story out with John Lewis, who is the United States representative in his office, and they're getting ready to go to the inauguration of President Barack Obama. And I enjoyed kind of this like flashback narrative, and really getting to see his work in the civil rights movement, and really the way that his work has paved a way for where we are now. And even though there's still so much work to be done, to just get to experience in a little way the amazing things that he has done was absolutely wonderful. Kind of this idea of because of them we can. And so I really just enjoyed the way that this story was told, and will absolutely be picking up the rest of the books in the series, issues in the series. I don't know how you talk about the graphic form, but yes, I will be continuing on when the library opens back up and I can get the rest of these. Next book, I listened to an audiobook and then kind of read some of it as well. I do that often. I'll kind of switch between the two formats, and that is the 4th book in the Maisie Dobbs series by Jacqueline Winspear. I don't know where my dust jacket has ran off to, so I have this naked hardcover here. The title of this one is Messenger of Truth. This is a cozy mystery series set in England a few years after World War I. They very much focus on the world after that very impactful and traumatic experience, especially on England. So a lot of the stories kind of focus around the ramifications from World War I and very much kind of going into World War II. They're cozy, they're very historical. The atmosphere is just so enveloping because it's so heavy with the times that it's written in, which is mostly why I read these books. They just feel so enveloping and cozy. There's a lot of social commentary of the time in these books, which I think is really interesting. Kind of as a future reader, she's still exploring some of these things, and we can see the work that's been done to bring us to where we are. But in particular, this one very much focuses on the very poor health conditions of those who were impoverished in this time. She takes a very personal look at these and usually is giving like a personal story that we can kind of relate to, but obviously we can take the lessons into modern day, so I very much enjoy her social commentary. I always feel like the endings of these are absolute perfection. They wrap up so well and so nicely, and this book wasn't my favorite in the series, but again, that ending just kind of amped it up a little bit for me. It was a solid 3.5-star read. I will definitely be continuing on when I'm feeling in the mood for another one of these. They're very much mood reads. I need to be in the mood when I pick up one of these, but they're very cozy and very enjoyable. Next was the chunk that I kind of worked on all month, and that is The Final Empire, the first book in the Mistborn series by Brandon Sanderson. This is the gorgeous UK cover edition of this book. I absolutely loved it. This one was a really fun read for me. It's a much beloved high fantasy novel. It's very politically driven, which I always enjoy in my fantasy. I enjoyed the world building. Sanderson has a very simple writing style. It's so easy to get sucked into the world. The magic system is pretty complex. Those who have these magical abilities can ingest metals and they give them different powers. There's all sorts of metals, but I never felt too bogged down with all of that information, which is good. Basically, the premise is, what if the Dark Lord won? What if the person in power isn't the good guy, is kind of what the story is. The group of people in this world that are heavily oppressed are called the Ska, and we're kind of dealing with this tension between the nobility, person in power, I can't remember his name, the Dark Lord something, and then these people who are being oppressed, the Ska, and kind of what's going to happen, what's going to bubble up and burst from this. Overall, I really enjoyed this. I know I talked about it in my reading vlog, one of my weekend reading vlogs, but I kind of struggled at times with the dialogue between characters and also the way that they thought about things sometimes. It was hard for me to get on. I felt like he built such a high stakes atmosphere in a high stakes world, and some of the ways that they talked to one another and they dealt with things just didn't feel realistic for this world to me. I just struggled. I felt like it maybe was sometimes dealt with too much light. It kind of would feel a bit trite at times, and so for that reason I had a hard time really falling and believing these characters, because I was just drawn out of the story so many different times where I was just like, that just doesn't feel, it just didn't seem right to me. Totally a personal opinion, totally a personal preference. I still really enjoyed the story and do plan to continue on. I just am not loving this book like so many people do. So I also think maybe my expectations were a little too high just because I've heard so much praise. But that being said, it was still a really good story and still one that I would recommend if high fantasy is your thing, and I think Brandon Sanderson is a great place to start because his writing is so accessible. I also wanted to say this is pretty plot heavy, especially at the end. It's like all of these things happening at once, which can be typical of fantasy, but it's just not my favorite type of fantasy. I'm more in it for that slow burn, and there was a lot of plot. Also, he writes really intense battle scenes, really kind of they're like doing all these things, and again, just isn't great for my personal taste. So I think those were some other aspects that kind of kept me from like absolutely loving this book. Next one that I picked up in April was Ordinary Grace by William Kent Kruger. This was such a delight of a book, very much Midwestern fiction. This is kind of a new to me author. I actually just picked this up in my most recent book outlet haul, and it was just calling to me and I had to read it. This follows a young boy in Minnesota, and we're kind of in this like pivotal summer in his life. He's totally confronted with death in many different forms, and it's just his grappling with it and how it has changed his perspective moving forward. And it's written from the perspective of an older man writing about this summer and these experiences that he's going through. I really think this book is looking at the small moments in life, whether those are tragic or hopeful or good, and how those small moments can become pivotal and huge moments in the grand scheme of things, how they can totally alter and change our perspective, change our life, And even though they seem so small and mundane, they really can have such a profound impact. In this, our main character is dealing with memory and history and perspective and how it's so personal to us. Very similar to kind of some of those themes that The Dutch House by Anne Patchett was dealing with in very different ways, but kind of a similar vibe there. And in all that, we're also looking at childhood and growing up and kind of what defines our life. What are those small moments that define us as we grow and change? But also, it's definitely looking at tragedy and how we're affected by tragedy and how we can let it affect us. At the very end, there is a line that his father says. He says, "It's been a good day," my father says with satisfaction. "It's been a good life." And it's such a profound ending to the story because there has been so much sadness and tragedy, but it's also very much looking at the resilience of the human spirit and moving on from that. There is also some Christian themes in this about grace and the grace of God, and I don't think that you have to be a Christian to enjoy this book, but those themes are definitely in it. We're looking at how we give ourselves grace, how we give others grace, and as a Christian, I was very much moved by those moments, but I don't think that you would have to be to appreciate his writing and his musings on grace. A very solid, good read. Can't wait to read more Kruger. I recently signed up for Book of the Month, and I chose as an add-on his book, This Tender Land, and I'm very, very, very excited to read that one. Alright, and last but certainly not least was an audiobook, Red at the Bone by Jacqueline Winspear, another pretty new release. This is a short little guy. The audiobook is barely 4 hours. I know it's about 200 pages in print, and I really enjoyed this one. I've read Brown Girl Dreaming by Jacqueline Woodson, and she definitely has a very distinct writing style. I also listened to that one on audiobook, which I highly recommend. It's a memoir and she narrates it, and it's lovely. But I was so sucked back into her writing style and just remembered how evocative and distinct it is. In the story, we're following one family and following multiple different perspectives. It's not linear. We're jumping around all different time periods. It very much feels like memories and kind of recounting memories and experiences. I guess that was kind of a theme this month in a lot of my reading, but I very much enjoy that in my storytelling. This book is looking at historical trauma and the influence of that on our children and their children. Also looking at family expectation, what we want for ourselves, what others want for us, and how that kind of fits together. There's a lot of beautiful personal moments between characters in this that really resonated with me, and overall it was a really good read. Like I said, Woodson's writing is so distinctive and so lovely. I would highly recommend any of her books on audio, though I would like to own a copy of this and go back and kind of underline some lines. I think I could glean more out of it on a second reading with my eyes. Alright, that's it. That's everything that I read in April. I would love to know what you read in April. What was your favorite? Let's chat about it down in the comments below. Please like this video if you enjoyed it, and please subscribe if you would like more bookish videos. I'm also trying to be more active on my Bookstagram account. It's at happilyeveresch, just like my handle here on YouTube. It's also linked down below, but I would love to connect with you there. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you're having a great rest of your day, and I will talk to you later. Bye. In case you're wondering where I got my shirt, oh, I'm reading again. I follow a Bookstagrammer, and I'm not going to remember her name off the top of my head, but she'll be linked down below, and she recently opened a used bookstore called Oh That's Novel, which I think is so cute. And this was like a shirt that they're doing right now while they're having to be closed to kind of raise some funds. I'm not sure how much longer it will be open to the public, but I think for at least a couple more days. So if you're interested in purchasing this cute t-shirt, it will also be linked down below. I've been loving supporting all the small businesses online, and so just wanted to show off my cute shirt. All right, goodbye.